Welcome back, everyone. Ready for another deep dive. Today, we're going to be time traveling back to February 26.
Looking forward to it. What do we have in store?
Well, we're going to be unearthing some fascinating events, all from that one single date.
Okay, I'm intrigued. Where are we getting our information from today?
We've got some great excerpts from This Day in History compilation, and I think you'll be surprised by what we find. Politics, inventions, even pop culture moments, and some health advice, too. It's really a mixed bag.
It's always fascinating to see how all those different aspects of life kind of converge on a single day throughout history.
You know, you're right. It really is. Like, where do we even begin with this one? Let's start in Europe, February 26, 1815. This is when Napoleon escapes from exile on the island of Elba.
Napoleon.
Yeah.
He wasn't just content with a quiet life, was he? That escape really set off a chain reaction.
It did. It led to the 100 Days War, his last attempt to grab power again. You know, thinking about it, he was kind of like the El Chapo of his time.
That's a great comparison. A master of escape and always seeking to regain control. But in the end, Waterloo put an end to his ambitions. Still, you can't deny the impact he had on Europe, even in that short period.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, so let's fast forward a bit. 1863, across the Atlantic now, President Lincoln signs the National Currency Act.
Ah, yes. Money. This was the big deal for the U.S., wasn't it?
Huge. It was the foundation for a national banking system, which, they hadn't really had before. And think about the timing, right in the middle of the Civil War.
Definitely a critical moment for the U.S. to get its financial house in order. It standardized the currency and played a huge role in stabilizing the economy during a very chaotic period.
Definitely makes you appreciate those seemingly dry financial decisions, doesn't it?
Oh.
Same year, 1869, the 15th Amendment is sent to the states for ratification. This one aimed to guarantee voting rights no matter your race.
A landmark achievement, to be sure, especially after the Civil War and the abolition of slavery. It really aimed to solidify those freedoms for African Americans.
But of course, the fight for true equality at the polls, that was far from over, right?
Sadly, yeah.
Yeah.
It took decades more of struggle to truly make that promise a reality. But the 15th Amendment was a crucial turning point, for sure.
It's incredible how certain events mark these pivotal shifts in history. Okay, for something a bit more lighthearted, how about this? 1895, Michael Owens. He patents a glass-blowing machine.
Try to imagine a time when every single bottle and jar was made by someone actually blowing into molten glass.
It's mind-boggling. This invention really revolutionized things, right?
Absolutely. Owens' machine marked a major leap forward in automation and mass production. Glass became cheaper, more accessible, industries were transformed, and there's actually a funny little story about how he came up with the idea.
Oh, tell me. I love those little historical quirks.
Well, apparently he was initially working on a machine to cool down hot coffee. The goal: to prevent glassblowers from getting hiccups on the job.
No way. Seriously?
Yeah. He was worried about them, quote, developing a pain in their stomachs.
Oh, that's amazing. I'm glad he moved on from coffee coolers, though. Seems like the glass-blowing machine was a slightly bigger deal.
You could say that. It's funny how sometimes the simplest problems can lead to these groundbreaking inventions.
It really makes you think. Okay, let's jump to the early 1900s. 1907, members of Congress get a raise. They're now making $7,500 a year. The vice president, $12,000.
I wonder what they would think of those salaries now. It probably wouldn't even cover their coffee expenses for a year in Washington.
It's all relative, right?
Yeah.
But even back then, it sparked a lot of debate. How much should public servants be paid? That's a question we're still grappling with.
That's for sure. Okay, 1919, another big one for the U.S. Congress approves the funding for Grand Canyon National Park.
Yes. So basically, our tax dollars went to funding a big hole in the ground.
Well, it is a pretty spectacular hole. But seriously, it was a huge step forward for conservation. It marked a change in how we view and protect these natural wonders.
Yeah, it's like we finally realized that these amazing places needed to be preserved for future generations. Okay, time for another trip, this time to New York City in 1930. Something big happens. They install traffic lights.
Can you imagine the chaos before traffic lights? New York was already a bustling metropolis back then.
Oh, I know. And get this, our sources say it took people 3 weeks to even notice the new lights because the traffic was already so terrible.
Oh, wow, really?
Yeah, can you imagine? It's crazy to think about how long it takes for people to adapt to new things, even when they're designed to make things better.
That's a good point. And it also kind of highlights how we're always trying to find ways to manage urban growth and all the challenges that come with it.
So true. Okay, let's shift gears a bit. 1951, the 22nd Amendment is ratified. This limits presidents to 2 terms.
A big change to the Constitution and a direct response to FDR's 4 terms in office.
It's interesting, right? Like, how do you balance power in a democracy? How much power should one person have? The 22nd Amendment is trying to answer those questions.
Yeah, for sure. It's a reminder that democracy is a work in progress, constantly adapting to new circumstances.
Speaking of adapting, this next one's a little bit different. 1960, home fallout shelter kits go on sale in New York City for $105.
Now that's a blast from the past. Remember those drills we used to have in school? Duck and cover? Those are the days.
Oh, I remember those. It's almost funny to think about now, but back then, the fear of a nuclear attack was very real. It was a constant worry.
Yeah, the Cold War cast a long shadow over everyday life. Those fallout shelters, whether they would have actually worked or not, they really show how deeply that fear was ingrained in people's minds.
Absolutely. It's hard to grasp how much the world has changed since then.
Truly. And it makes you wonder what events happening now will seem just as unbelievable to future generations.
It's really amazing how all these events, big and small, they all come together to tell a story about a specific time in history. But before we get too serious, let's lighten things up a bit. February 26th also has a few fun, quirky celebrations attached to it.
Oh, I love those. What do we have?
Well, we've got National Letter to an Elder Day.
That's sweet.
We've also got National Set a Good Example Day.
Always a good reminder.
And get this, we've got National Pistachio Day.
Pistachios. Okay, now you've got my attention.
And to top it all off, it's National Tell a Fairy Tale Day.
Okay, now that is a great combination. Pistachios and fairy tales. I'm in.
Me too. You know, speaking of pistachios, our sources actually mentioned some interesting health benefits. Apparently, they're good for you.
Oh, I knew there was a reason I loved them.
Right. So there's all this research that links eating nuts regularly, pistachios included, to a lower risk of dying from, well, pretty much anything.
Seriously. That's amazing.
Yeah, it is. They were looking at data from places like Dana-Farber Cancer Institute, Brigham and Women's Hospital, even Harvard was involved. And they found that people who ate nuts regularly had like a 20% lower risk of dying from any cause compared to people who didn't eat nuts.
Wow, that's a pretty compelling reason to grab a handful of pistachios. Maybe we should celebrate National Pistachio Day every day.
I'm not arguing with that. Okay, but now let's switch gears to National Tell a Fairy Tale Day. There's just something magical about fairy tales, don't you think? They capture our imagination no matter how old we are.
Absolutely. And they're more than just stories for kids. You know, they're like these little capsules of wisdom passed down through generations. They teach us about right and wrong. They explore universal themes. They even give us a glimpse into the human psyche.
You know, you're right. And our source actually has some pretty funny examples of how you can reimagine these classic stories with a modern twist.
Oh, I love that. Like what?
Well, they have Little Red Riding on Jimmy Johnson's hood, Beauty and the pro wrestler named Beast, Snow White and the 7th game of the NBA playoffs.
Oh, those are fantastic. So clever. It's really cool to see how these age-old stories can be adapted and reinterpreted, you know, to fit our current interests and make us think about them in new ways.
Exactly. It's like proof that stories have this amazing power to connect with us across time and cultures. And it just makes you wonder what other creative spins on fairy tales are out there waiting to be discovered.
That's a great question for our listeners to ponder. Okay, so back to February 26th, we also have some notable birthdays to celebrate today. Jennifer Grant, the actress, turns 59. A lot of people probably remember her from Beverly Hills 90210 back in the 90s.
Oh, yeah, for sure. And how about Greg German? He's celebrating his 67th birthday. He was Richard Fish on Ally McBeal, right?
That's the one. I loved that show.
Okay, and then we have a musical legend turning 72 today, Michael Bolton.
How Am I Supposed to Live Without You? Classic.
Such a classic. And finally, we can't forget about Mitch Ryder. He's turning 80 today. Devil with a Blue Dress. Anyone?
Oh, I love that song.
Yeah.
It's amazing to think about all the talented people who share this birthday. They've really left their mark on the world of entertainment.
It's a good reminder that even as time goes by, the power of creativity, of music, of storytelling, it all continues to bring us together. It's really incredible, isn't it? Just taking one single day, February 26th, and looking at all these stories, these events, it really opens your eyes to how much history is packed into every single day. We've gone from Napoleon to glass blowing to politics, fairy tales, even pistachios.
Yeah, it's like a reminder that history isn't just about the big headlines, you know? It's also about all the little details, all the seemingly insignificant things that shape our lives and the world around us.
It makes you wonder, like, what's happening today that we think is just ordinary, but that people will look back on 100 years from now and find fascinating.
Right. It could be something happening in science, a discovery maybe, that isn't getting a lot of attention now, but will turn out to be hugely important. Or maybe it's some cultural trend that seems silly now, but will end up defining this era. Who knows?
It's kind of a mind-blowing thought, right? That we're all living through history right now in this moment. And even the small things we do could have a ripple effect down the line.
It really highlights how connected everything is, past, present, future. We're all part of this ongoing story.
So as we wrap up our deep dive into February 26th, I want to hear from you. What surprised you the most today? What stuck with you? Did you learn anything new?
We always love hearing from our listeners. Share your thoughts, your questions, your insights. And remember, history is happening all around us every day. So keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep learning.
That's a great way to put it. Thanks for joining us on this journey back in time. Until next time, keep those minds curious.